All right, so we learned translations. Does anybody, last week, does anybody remember the key word for translations? We kind of did a little, tie into a song. Translations slide to the left and they slide to the right. All right, so translations slide, but they don't rotate and they don't change size. So those are my rules for translations. With reflections, the key word I want you to remember is that they flip. All right, so what is the most common real-life example of a reflection?
Flipping a coin?
A mirror. Okay, so a reflection, if you look in the mirror, okay, you see a reflection of yourself, or you see a reflection of your image in like crystal clear water. All right, so when we're talking reflections, all right, and I have the graph on here because I want you to see visually what's happening. All right, because if all you try to do is memorize what's in bold here, it can get real confusing. To reflect across X, I do the opposite of the Y value. To reflect across the Y-axis, I do the opposite of the X value. Do you see how you can kind of switch that up in your mind? Okay, but look what's happening. If I want to reflect a point across the X-axis, okay, so let's plot point -4, 4. Okay, I want you on the graph to plot point -4, 4. Go ahead and plot that on your graph. That's kind of a tiny point. I want to see if I can make it bigger. All right. If I want to reflect it across the X-axis, which means I want it to flip over the X-axis, I will do the opposite Y value. So it was +4. Now it's going to be what? -4. So do you see what happened? In order to make it cross over the X-axis, I simply did the opposite Y value. Does that make sense more visually? Okay. So now let's do the same thing with the same, or I'm sorry, not the same thing, but now let's do a Y-axis reflection with the same original point. Okay, so if I wanted my original point to now reflect across the Y-axis, which value would I do the opposite? I would do the opposite X. So it was on an X value of -4. Now it's going to go to an X value of +4, and it flips across the Y-axis. It's a mirror image. Okay, so now it's +4, up 4. All right, so I want you to go ahead and write in the ordered pairs for the image. All right, so when I reflected across the X-axis, my new point was -4, -4. So you can see that to reflect across X, my X value stays the same, but my Y value became the opposite value. And to reflect across Y, my X value became the opposite, which is now +4, and my Y value remained the same. All right, reflecting across the Y-axis. It just takes a little bit of practice, but once you guys get the hang of that, like once you guys understand, my rules for reversing or reflecting ordered pairs, it becomes a lot more automatic, because that's all there is to it. You just have to keep the rules straight. All right, any questions? Anything? Okay, so identifying a reflection. You're going to have a line of reflection. Okay, so that's what we see, the line between the images. So what I want to make sure is if I were to literally grab that figure and flip it, are the same points images of each other, okay, facing the same direction. All right, so look at this first set, my parallelograms. What do you guys think? Are those reflections? Yes, they are. Okay, so if it is a reflection, I want you to describe it. And what I mean by describing is I want you to tell me which axis was reflected. And again, we're There is a diagonal reflection in here, but no, wait, that's not a reflection. If it's diagonal, then you could just say diagonal, but you won't actually have to do one. All right, so this is an x-axis reflection. So on your quiz and your test next week, if I asked you to identify the type of transformation, you would say reflection, tell me which axis. If it was a translation, you would tell me how many units, left, right, up, or down. Okay, so you do have to kind of describe it also. All right, what do you guys think about the next set of images? What do you guys think? Is that a reflection? No, what is it? That's a translation. That's a slide.
Because wouldn't it have, like the blue arrow would have to be pointing?
Yeah, the point of that figure would have to be both facing the vertical axis, and it's not. That's a translation. All right, what do you guys think about the next figure, the trapezoids? Well, you know what? That is a reflection. I was thinking for a minute those side links were different, but it looks different to me here versus what it looks like on my iPad.
We haven't seen one.
Yeah, we'll just say it's a reflection. Again, like on my screen, it looks different. When I'm looking on my iPad, it definitely looks like a reflection. All right, so we're just going to say reflection and across a diagonal axis. That's more for Algebra 1. You could say axis. That's fine. All right, what do you guys think about the pentagons? No, what is it? That's a translation again. All right, so easy enough, just kind of identifying reflections with images. So now we're going to practice reflecting specific points. All right, so we're not going to reflect the entire figure. We're just going to take specific points and practice taking the opposite value. So there really is no math to do. All we're doing is doing opposite values, which makes the point reflect across the axis that we're trying to reflect. All right, so it says reflect point A across the x-axis. So let's focus on point A. If I want to reflect that across the x-axis, so think x-axis horizontal, then I need to do the opposite of the y value to make it flip down over the x-axis, or in this case, up over the x-axis. So my point will now be, I'm going to say A prime. If I'm reflecting x, my x value stays the same. And I do the opposite y value. So hopefully you can visualize that in your mind. It was at -4 down 3. Now it's at -4 up 3, which means it flipped up over the x-axis, which is what I wanted. All right, now let's do point A. Same original point, go back to the original, but let's flip it across the y-axis. If I were to reflect point A across the y-axis, so now I'm trying to get it to flip horizontally across to reflect across y, I do the opposite of what?
X.
The x value. So now x was -4. Now it's going to be +4. And guys, remember, you keep the other value the same. So it stays -3. All right, I want you to go ahead and do the second two on your own. Okay, so to reflect point B across the x-axis, I did the opposite of the y value. So B prime is going to be -4 and +1. Give me thumbs up if you guys got it. Thumbs up? All right, very good. And what about point D? Reese, what did you get for point D? All right, do you guys agree? 1 and -3. To reflect across y, do the opposite of x. That's it. That's all there is to it. Okay? All right, so in example 2, what I want to do now And this will be on your homework assignment tonight, but remember, big ideas, this is where we really love it, right? Because big ideas is going to give us the graph, and all we have to do is just hit the points on the screen versus having to create our own graph and do all that. All right, so the first thing I want you to do, and if you guys have like different color pens or whatnot, like it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to use that on this just so you can kind of see the differences between the figures. Not a big deal, or you could highlight them. So highlight the figures like different once you plot them. So I've got my original. The first thing I want you to do is plot the original 3 points on your graph. All right, 1, 1, 1, 4, and 3, 4. Go ahead and plot your original points. All right, so we're at 1, 1, 1, 4, and over 3 up 4. All right, does your original triangle look like this? Okay, and we're going to go A, B, and C. All right, so for a moment, I want to just focus on the graph, okay? So we're not going to worry about the ordered pairs, and we just practiced reflecting ordered pairs. What if we just used the graph to reflect? Okay, so let's take the image. All right, again, just focus on the graph. Don't look at the ordered pairs at all now. What if I wanted to reflect point A across the x-axis? Look over here at the graph. If I wanted to reflect point A across the x-axis, all right, it goes from a positive 1 to a negative 1. I can just do that, right? I can visually flip this image, and I know if I'm reflecting across the x-axis, all I'm doing is the opposite y values. So now point A prime just goes down to a negative 1 y value. What about B? Point B, what's B going to be? It was at positive 4, so now it's going to be down at negative 4. What about point C? It was over at positive 4, over 3 up 4. Now it's going to be over 3 down 4. And look, all right, don't forget your dotted line. Okay, dotted line to connect the image. And you can label the A prime so your readers can see how it's flipping. B prime and C prime. Do you see how that's a flip? Do you see how it flips? All right. So if I wanted to go back to the same original figure and flip it now horizontally across the y-axis, which values do I take the opposite of? My x values, right? So now point A was at a positive 1 x value. So what's it going to be at now? Negative 1 x value. So all you're doing now is reversing your x values to reflect across the y-axis. So now it's at negative 1 and then negative 3 up 4. I'm sorry, negative 3, not negative 4. All right, negative 3 up 4 and negative 1 up 4. And now I've created an image reflected across the y-axis. All right, and I can label A prime, B prime, and C prime. All right, any questions there? So you see, guys, we're not changing the size. All we're doing is just flipping the figures. All right, we're not going to worry about the coordinates of the images, again, because we've already practiced reflecting coordinates. I just wanted you to see how it works on a graph as well. All right, any questions? Okay, so now we're going to describe all of the translations or transformations that you're going to learn. We're going to do this type of section on it. So with translations, I looked at the points and I said, okay, to get from my first point to my second point, how many units would I move left or right? Okay, so with these points, all right, to describe the relationship, I'm looking for which point, my x or my y value, becomes the opposite in the image. All right, so let's look at the first one. Does my x value change? No. Does my y value change? Yes. So if I'm doing the opposite of y, that means I reflected x. All right? That means I reflected x because remember, it was at a y value of positive 3. Now it's at a y value of negative 3. It flipped over the x-axis. So if y is the opposite, that means the x-axis was reflected. So what do you guys think about the second point? Okay, the x value is the opposite. So that means the y-axis was reflected. All right, so now let's look at points to their image on the bottom. I want you to go ahead and identify the line of reflection for both of them. All right, go ahead and give that a shot. All right, so I see that my y values are the opposite, so that means the x-axis was reflected. What did you guys notice about the next one? They both reflected. So one thing we want to point out here is that it is possible to reflect a point across both axes. All right, so it is possible to have both x and y. All right, any questions? Doing okay? Not too painful for a Monday morning? All right, last thing we're going to do. Graphic artist designs a t-shirt using a pentagon with vertices that we see as the following. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is plot all of the original points. Okay, one thing I need you to make sure that you do is connect the points in alphabetical order. You don't necessarily have to label them on the graph. I know it's a lot of points, but I need you to connect them in alphabetical order. Otherwise, it won't make the shape. So you're going to draw the line from P to Q, Q to R, R to S, S to T. All right, go ahead and do that. All right, here we go. 0, 0. That one's pretty straightforward, right? I think I'll use purple. Just help it kind of pop a little bit. All right, so 0, 0, -2, 0. Oh, hold on. That's better. -1 up 3. -4 up 3. Oh, goodness. And 0 up 7. All right, did I get -2, 0, -1 up 3? All right, so now I'm going to connect them in alphabetical order. So I go 0, 0, -2, 0, -1 up 3. All right, does yours look like this? Oops, hold on. Okay, so now to reflect it in the y-axis, if I were you, I would just use the graph. If you're reflecting y, you want to make sure that your image points are the same distance across from the y-axis on the other side. So we simply, now 0, 0, is 0, 0 going to change at all? No. Okay, so that one stays the same, 0, 0. But now it's +2, 0, +1 up 3, +4 up 3, and then 0, 7 again. All right, so I'm going to create my image. And there we go. There's our t-shirt design.
It's like an arrow.
Yeah, it's like an arrow. Okay, maybe the text says smartest person in the class. And then the arrow is like pointed up. Obviously, that probably wasn't a good joke, but 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, that's what you get. Okay, so that's pretty much everything for the lesson today. We're going to grab Chromebooks and kind of bust open our big ideas homework and get some practice in. Practice makes perfect, right? Especially in math. So, but that's everything for today's lesson.